been a lot of attention given to Will's mindset that night. The night that there's a lot of attention given to what it must have driven him to this.
One thing. Why? Why so far? You guys went so far. I lost so much.
D.L. Hughley calls out Will Smith for crossing lines on Fresh Prince. Some say the past leaves footprints you can't wash away. According to D.L. Hughley, those footprints might trace back to the Fresh Prince years. He alleges that behind the laughter, the charm, and the success, something darker lived on that set. Something not about physical harm, but about leverage, emotional pressure, psychological games, professional control, ego, manipulation, power. And if what he alleges holds any truth, then maybe the image of Hollywood's golden boy isn't as spotless as many believed. Maybe the shine came with shadows. It's wild, right? Everybody weighed in on that slap. Think pieces, hot takes, lectures, memes. Everybody had a response. Except, as was pointed out at the time, the person who actually got slapped didn't get to own the conversation for long. People decided what the appropriate response should be, argued the moral math, then tried to stretch one moment into a verdict on everything and everyone.
Except the man who got slapped. I don't think you should ever have the right to tell somebody what's appropriate for their response. But I don't know how you extrapolate that into his perspective about every single black one. Millions of people thought he was punching down on the night.
That rush to define things? It says a lot. Let's get straight into it. D.L. Hughley didn't mince words. In a recent conversation, he said the quiet part out loud, that the Will Smith people saw, the smiling Fresh Prince, the effortless star, wasn't always the Will people felt on set. He said Will was undeniably talented. He said fame hit young and hit hard. And that kind of lightning can change how you see yourself and how you treat people, even if you don't mean harm at first. When youth, ego, and power collide, you can end up with someone who starts treating people around them like they're disposable. That's the allegation. It lands because fans grew up with Will as the dream. The Philly kid who flipped a rhyme into a career, a sitcom into a dynasty. But to some who were there, D.L. suggests that dream came with a cost paid quietly by others. To the world, the Fresh Prince set looked like family.
The IRS. In my mind, I wasn't like trying to avoid paying taxes. I was just like, oh, damn, they need their money.
Behind the scenes, he says, there was tension, competition, and silence where pain lived. He alleges Will used his clout to shape who stood where, who spoke when, who got the punchline, and who got the cut. Jokes in public, distance in private, warmth on camera, coldness off it. If you crossed lines, your role crossed out. Not screaming, not fists, just the subtle stuff that leaves no bruise but changes your day, your job, your future. That's when people start connecting dots they'd seen but never traced. Because for years, there's been the story everyone knows, Janet Hubert, the original Aunt Viv. Her exit was messy in the public telling. Rumors, labels, whispers. She was painted as difficult, temperamental, hard to work with. But if you listen to what D.L. lays out, the angle shifts. He claims Janet wasn't the problem. She was the one who refused to fold. She pushed back. She challenged. And according to him, Will didn't take kindly to being challenged, especially by someone older, seasoned, and unafraid.
He was young, and he was inexperienced, and I think he simply had to win.
He alleges Will used influence with producers to have her replaced. Then, he says, the narrative machine moved quietly, and the public took its cues. Years later, the reunion aired. Tears, hugs, apologies. It played as healing. D.L.'s take? He argues that moment served image more than reconciliation. He reads it as narrative control, a way to shape how the world sees him after time and headlines had taken a toll. He suggests apologies can double as PR, especially when timing lines up with reputational storms. But he doesn't stop with Janet. He hints that other cast members felt the ripples too. Alfonso Ribeiro as Carlton, Joseph Marcell as Jeffrey. He describes a pecking order, favorites at the table, others watching their portion shrink. If you agreed, if you laughed at the right moments, if you made the star feel bigger, you got love. If you shined too bright or resisted, you got dimmed. That's the claim. It's heavy to hear because the show on our screens was unity, family, joy. It was culture and excellence and love wrapped in comedy. But DL's version suggests that behind the laughter, stress lines formed, and that the person holding the hammer often stood center stage. Why is DL speaking at all? He's not some outsider peering through blinds. He's been in the game since the 90s. He's worked the circuits, seen the politics, felt the currents. He's talked before about how fame changes people, especially when it arrives before you've grown your roots. He argues Will was a superstar before he was fully a man. When a crowd crowns you at 21, it's easy to believe you can do no wrong. That cocktail, ego and innocence, brews trouble. You skip humility, but you master charm. You master performance, but you miss empathy. That's DL's critique. And if you track his logic forward, he points to patterns. The Oscars in 2022.
Been a lot of attention given to Will's mindset that night. The night that there's a lot of attention given to what it must have driven him to this.
The moment caught forever. He argued then that it wasn't simply about a joke or a marriage. It was about control, about not being able to live with the laugh landing on you. The same energy, he says, that would push someone aside on a set shows up bigger on a stage. Same person, different scale. People don't want to hear this because Will is woven into pop culture's joy. Men in Black, Bad Boys, The Pursuit of Happiness, decades of hits. He's that face you grew up trusting. But DL's words make some fans watch old clips differently. They look for jokes that cut a little sharper, interviews with attention they missed, smiles that feel like shields. And then they recall little comments from others over the years. Karen Parsons saying the atmosphere was fun but sensitive, with big egos colliding. Joseph Marcell noting Will's strong personality. Alfonso Ribeiro reminding folks the cast wasn't as tied away from the set as people imagined. None of that proves anything on its own, but when you lay it out, you start to see a possible shape. DL pushes the idea that charm can be a mask, not cruelty in the open, calculation in the wings, the smile that invites you in while the decision that excludes you happens somewhere else. That, he says, is why people stayed quiet. Because who stands up publicly against the Fresh Prince at the peak of the Fresh Prince? Who challenges the person America has decided is unproblematic? You risk your career, not theirs. Critics say DL is bitter, that he's chasing attention, that he resents success. He addresses that by separating talent from treatment. You can be gifted and still hurt people. You can build an empire and still leave cracks in the floor. The quote that sticks is the one about empires built on broken backs, tall, impressive, and quietly unstable. After those comments spread, people went back to episodes with new eyes. They noticed how often the hero gets the last word, the camera's warmth, the applause. That doesn't make the star a villain. It makes DL's point plausible, that off-camera dynamics can mirror on-camera framing. He suggests the role seeped into life, the need to be the center of every scene, on screen and off. It's complicated because The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air wasn't just entertainment. It was a milestone. It gave representation depth, heart, humor, and dignity. It bridged worlds. It taught lessons and made people laugh through tears. But it's possible, as DL frames it, that while the show healed audiences, the set gathered its own wounds. He isn't calling Will a monster. He's arguing that power went unchecked, and that kind of power carves lines not just in the people around you, but in you too. When the reunion aired in 2020, it felt like a circle closing. Hugs, apologies, grace. A collective exhale. DL says, look again. He says the platform, the framing, the words, those choices matter. He reads control in the architecture of the apology. Even peace can be curated. Even healing can have a director. So what's the takeaway? DL isn't trying to torch a legacy, he says. He's trying to remind people that the story we celebrate is rarely the whole story. Smiles can be medicine or armor. Applause can be love or cover. Heroes on screen can be complicated off it. That truth is uncomfortable because we want the people who raised us on laughter to be as kind behind the camera as they were charming on it. But perfection is a fantasy, and fantasies are fragile. Since then, the internet did what it always does: divide. Some call DL a liar. Others call him brave. A few insiders hint agreement without stepping into the light. And Will? Mostly silent. No deep-dive interview, no line-by-line rebuttal. Just the familiar grin in curated moments. Over time, that grin can start to read less like joy and more like a shield. Here's the bigger picture, beyond headlines and hot takes. These claims force a question about how power works in entertainment and everywhere. How easy it is to confuse charisma with character. How success can hide its costs. How one person's rise can be built on a team's quiet sacrifices. If DL is right, even partly, then the lesson isn't just about a sitcom set from decades ago. It's about leadership, accountability, and the stories we choose to believe because they feel good. Maybe the real Fresh Prince story isn't only about jokes, dances, and heart-to-hearts in a living room we all wished we could visit. Maybe it's about what happens when a young man is handed the world before he knows how to hold it. Maybe it's about what gets lost on the way to staying number one. And maybe, all these years later, the fragments of truth are finally drifting to the surface because time loosens every grip. So, what do you think? Did DL Hughley reveal a pattern people didn't want to see? Or is this another Hollywood tale powered by memory, grievance, and the way stories bend when told years later? Either way, the more you look past the laughter, the more complicated it gets. If you found this perspective useful, tap like, subscribe, and stick around. We'll keep asking the uncomfortable questions, and we'll keep looking for answers where the spotlight doesn't always shine.